Do do do. Josh review. Yeah. Hello everyone. Welcome to another album review with me, Joshua Smith. And today I'm going to be looking at the album Beyoncé. It's her self-titled album, so of course it's called Beyoncé. And this album review has actually been several months in the making. I've actually wanted to do this since almost December, but I was in the midst of I had technical difficulties. And I was also, changing up my style, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with the show. And now that I figured it out, I think I can finally do this review. So anyways, this album was released December 13th of 2013. Some chart information about it. It peaked number 1 on the US Billboard 200, number 1 on the US Billboard Top 10 R&B hip-hop charts, and is currently certified double platinum in the US, selling over 2,200,000 records. And has since won numerous awards, nominations, and accolades, including 3 Grammy Awards. It was released on the label Parkwood and Columbia, and its singles are XO, Drunken Love, Partition, Pretty Hurts, and Flawless. So without further ado, let's get this started. Let me just get this out of the way right now. This album is one of the best modern albums I've heard in a long time. The way it feels as a whole, the way it makes the listener feel, and everything about it screams, as the song says, flawless. This album is truly a milestone for Beyoncé and pop music in general. It brings back the idea of the album, and how not just the songs within the album being separated, as most artists seem to do today. It all flows and connects with one another just as an album should. And on this album, Beyoncé shows a side of her she's really only hinted at in previous records, but on this LP she lets every bit of it out, and she doesn't hold back one single bit. Of course, being that she's Beyoncé, the main focal genre of this album is R&B mixed with pop, but she takes it a step further, blending different and somewhat unconventional subgenres to keep each track fresh and feeling different from the last. Some tracks like Drunken Love and Flawless incorporate trap beats, giving it more of a dirty and southern feel, which greatly complements the theme of the album, but at its core, it's an R&B album above all else. If Gucci Mane is the trap god, then you can just call Bey the trap goddess. Now, the lyrical content found on this album varies, but all of it stays within a pocket of feminine thoughts and needs. Most people regard Beyoncé as a symbol of feminism and feminine values, and while she shows that on tracks like Flawless, on a great deal of tracks on this album, she breaks down that stereotype that feminists are sexless, men-hating hooligans. She proves that as strong as a feministic symbol she is, she's still just that, a female, and that females have certain needs, a great deal of it pertaining to sex, which there's plenty of on this album. I can only imagine what Jay-Z was thinking when Beyoncé wrote some of these songs. We all know that they were directed towards him. What's interesting about the sexual content on this album is that it all feels like it's building up to a peak, or perhaps in this case, an orgasm, as Beyoncé starts off pretty light with Drunken Love, which is pure trap goodness over extremely heavy bass, and even featuring her husband, Jay-Z. Then in Blow, which is probably the funkiest track on the album, blending the usual pop with funk and disco elements, she goes into some of her more personal sexual desires by means of oral sex, even giving a bit of a disclaimer that the second half is more for grown-ups. It isn't until we get to Rocket that we discover Beyoncé's true sexual desires. It's dark, it's heavy, it's classic R&B mixed with soul, and it's probably the dirtiest point on the album. But Beyoncé does something that keeps it somewhat innocent at the same time, which is the exact opposite of what the track really is. It's highly sensual and intimate, and that's perhaps what gives it a certain vibe that it's not as raunchy as it makes out to be. It's comparable to a Prince record in its pure sexuality and instrumentation. As for the other themes discussed on this album, one theme that sticks out from the very beginning in Pretty Hurts is that women are always trying to maintain this impossible vision of beauty. Society and companies like Vogue are always telling them that skinny is beautiful, or tan skin is what's in, etc., etc. And with Beyoncé being one of the biggest icons in beauty and fashion in America, you can imagine how hard it is to maintain that image. Other themes found on tracks like No Angel, which has been described as a chill wave song, says that neither she or her husband Jay-Z are perfect, not for each other and not even in the eye of the public, considering that people consider Beyoncé to be somewhat of a perfect woman. It kind of connects with Pretty Hurts and how, for society, image is everything. Jealous has her talking about how she's conflicted in her feelings with her relationship with Jay-Z, and he shouldn't judge her for being jealous when he's seen with other women or when he's out for a long time. She's saying that it's natural for women to be jealous, and on tracks like Mine, which features Drake, on a more futuristic-sounding beat, which actually changes up throughout the track, talk about doubts within a relationship and doubts with motherhood, and Superpower, which features Frank Ocean, talks about love and the pleasure and pain it can bring. XO is a pure love song expressing feelings of wanting to love Jay-Z for all time. I know that was really long-winded, but there are just so many different themes that all interlock with each other in this album. One other theme is motherhood, and throughout 3 tracks, just about, one of those being Mine, as I've already stated, and the other two taking on both a dark and depressing form, and the other being a positive and loving form. In Heaven, Beyonce's talking about the sadness of having one of her daughters miscarried, and the amount of pain and suffering both she and Jay-Z went through, but declaring that Heaven must have needed her way more. It's a sad piano ballad that eventually introduces some light percussion, an echoing effect. Then in Blue, she dedicates the track to hers and Jay-Z's current daughter, Blue Ivy, and how proud she is of her, and how, through all the crap that Beyonce gets put through on a regular basis, Blue Ivy keeps her up and strong. One of the final themes of this album, and perhaps the most important, is female empowerment. Again, bringing up Flawless, Nigerian writer Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie speaks on feminism in order to empower young women to be greater than what they are and what society says they should be. Even from the start, this album had overtones of feministic values, but it's truly shown in this track, as Beyonce tells people that she woke up like this in reference to waking up in the morning feeling and looking fabulous, and it encourages all young women to feel the same, that they're beautiful in their own special way, and that they should show it. One more thing I have to mention about this album is that there are 2 tracks just about that are 2-part suites. Partition is 1 part hip-hop influenced, pulsating bass-filled goodness with lighter vocals through Beyoncé, and the second half, the actual Partition section, is much darker and heavier, both in vocals and instrumentals, as it contains more synthesizer than Beyoncé does. The other track being Flawless, which I think I've spoken enough about already, but having 2 parts in Bow Down and then the actual Flawless section. Overall, what more can I honestly say about this album? It's great, it's amazing lyrically, instrumentally, and sonically. It's rather experimental for someone like Beyonce, but the way the overall product turned out is quite fascinating. It's definitely worth more than just a listen. Give it several listens to get the whole idea wrapped within this album. It delves deep into the mind of Beyonce and gives us all a real look at her thoughts and her life. And the instrumentation is only the driving force for it all. None of the tracks were really weak per se, but some were definitely stronger than others in the sense that they contained just more. This album was introspective in a way that's really hard to explain. Beyonce recognized the power that an actual album holds in order to get a message out. The whole album flows and breathes in unison, with one track not being more important than another. She doesn't make the sexual nature of the album overbearing in any way. It's actually very much appreciated that she pushes the message even further, and it's all intentional. Beyonce wanted it to be as sexual as it is, and she certainly achieved that goal. It's one of the best R&B albums I've heard in a long time, and one of the best R&B albums, period, in a long time, and is perhaps one of the best albums of 2014, even being nominated for Album of the Year at the Grammys. Well, anyways, thank you for joining me on this another album review. If you want an album or a song reviewed that you like or may recommend, just leave a comment down below, and I'll get to it as soon as I possibly can. Once again, thank you very much for watching this. I know it was a little long-winded at some points, but there's just so much about this album that I had to get out, and I wanted to do it as quickly and as best as I could. But anyways, thank you for watching, and so long.